Events Manager at Tech Manitoba. Thank you for joining us for today's Tech Mashup, Creating Repeatable, Predictable Growth. In spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the ancestral lands of Treaty 1 territory. This is the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Tanahae peoples, and on the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. Tech Manitoba continually seeks to cultivate better relationships with Indigenous communities. Our mission in serving our members and assisting in growing the tech community, we are grateful to member organizations that support this community through participation, mentorship, and financial support. Special thanks to our Tech Mashup sponsor, DXC Technology. Today, we are joined by Ryan Ramsdale of inVision Edge. inVision Edge is a world-class boutique consulting firm that helps organizations build strategies, innovate with confidence, and achieve results. Ryan joined inVision Edge in 2019 as an innovation and strategy coach. He recently transitioned to Director of Operations. He works with clients daily to build innovative capabilities, navigate innovation projects, and build breakthrough strategic plans. Initially, Ryan followed his passion for the arts, studying film at the University of Manitoba and audio production at Mid-Ocean School of Media Arts. He has since completed further executive education at Athabasca University and the University of Winnipeg and Harvard Business School Online. Ryan has served in key roles for Shaw Communications and founded an executive coaching practice called inVision. Please help me welcome Ryan.
Thanks everybody for taking time from lunch to participate in this Tech Mashup. We're super excited to be part of it as well and happy to be members of Tech Manitoba. I am going to share with you the screen for today. We'll be doing some zoom in and zoom out on this. So if at any point you're not feeling well because I'm doing too much of this, please just look away from the screen, like at the IMAX. Remember that? Well, what we're talking about today, as you know, is creating repeatable, predictable growth. So what the heck does that mean? Growth is whatever is important for your particular sector or industry. So it's very easy to generalize it and say in private industry, if we're selling a product, growth means more sales. It could mean that you're a public servant and you're developing programs, and growth means we need more participation in a program. There are all kinds of different ways growth is measured. So I hope that you can kind of extrapolate that verbiage and make it work for you, because we're all looking to accomplish something. So let's get into how that is done. Now it says at the bottom there, strategy and innovation intersection point being key to accomplishing this repeatable growth. As Shaylin shared, we're a world-class boutique consulting firm. We work with clients to build strategies and help innovate with confidence, achieve results. What does that mean? Well, we do certification innovation training, and we also help coach innovation projects within organizations who are looking to make that a core business system. More on that in a bit. Why would you bother working with us? Well, 80% of those who we work with like to come back for more. We've got a 5-star Google rating and world-class net promoter score, meaning others like to advise that people work with us. That's very quick about us. What are the objectives to today's workshop? We're looking for clarity here, for you to understand how an organization can harness this intersection point between strategic planning or strategy and innovation to create repeatable, predictable growth. And secondly, be a little bit difficult in this format, but we do have places for you to work on your own and reflect, and places for you to interact a little bit with the presentation as well, all so that you can practice strategy and innovation tools that you can then take away from this and start using immediately in the context of your organization. I want to tie it to this diagram here, the growth blueprint. So if an organization is looking to remain relevant and to continue to grow in their sector, this is the roadmap to doing it. And we talk about the intersection between strategy and innovation. This is really the key diagram that explains how that happens. So on the extreme left, you've got strategy and you've got innovation. There is a little bit underneath that as far as outcomes. So what outcomes are you looking to achieve? So if I kind of just zoom in even further, give you the maximized view on that. When we're talking about strategy, we're talking about an aligned team producing an extraordinary result, and the outcome of innovation being an inquisitive team, innovating with confidence and clarity, creating transformational results. So everything here result focused for what the organization does. We split it into these three categories you can see across the top and bottom. There's readiness, there's design/system, and there's execution. When we work with clients, we definitely obsess on the execution side because that is typically a place where strategy and innovation tend to fail in organizations. Often there's some strength in the design, that middle category. The readiness, we see about 50-50, and there's a lot of organizations right now trending towards focus on the readiness, which we think is great. But it really is execution that is going to make innovation and strategy successful. So that's just a very quick overview of the blueprint. So when it comes to repeatable, predictable growth, it's following this all the way through. And it is linear when it comes to readiness, design, and execution, in case you're wondering about that. So what are we talking about when we're talking about strategy and innovation? These can mean a lot of different things to different people and to different organizations. So for the sake of this presentation, I want to talk about these definitions so that that's not just a big question mark in your mind. When we talk about strategy, we're talking about an intentional plan developed to determine the direction for the organization while setting a framework for action. That may seem obvious, it may not. Now, what I mean about that is a lot of people will embark on strategic planning, some regularly, some infrequently. Here and there, it might be like a good thing to do when a new leader comes in, but isn't a consistent discipline. We suggest that it should be a consistent discipline, something that's regularly updated, and something that is approached in a dynamic way. As opposed to, say, having a facilitator like myself come in and walk your organization through a process and give you a massive report and walking away. And what often happens is that goes up on the virtual shelf and isn't revisited because the day-to-day operation is so demanding, we tend to get dragged back into it. So really, the key is determining the direction and setting a framework for action. It really does need to dictate what we do because we're trying to accomplish some sort of long-term vision. Breath, that's strategy. Next is innovation. So what are we talking about here? Innovation, I know from my experience, Shailen also mentioned that I was part of Shaw previous to working at inVision Edge. My days at Shaw, I remember going on LinkedIn, sitting in my office at some point in the afternoon, and then I'd see this word coming up more and more frequently. I found it kind of irritating, to be honest. Maybe something that's a little too trendy, maybe something that's just for the tech sector. But that's not the case, despite the fact that we're in a Tech Manitoba Tech Mashup today. Innovation is a core business system. So as you can see in the definition here, it's a repeatable and reliable system that solves meaningful problems or accelerates opportunities in a unique way. So the key parts here are it's a system, it's solving meaningful problems, and it does so in a unique way. So it isn't just kind of the latest gadget. It isn't just a random light bulb moment. It isn't Doc Brown slipping off the toilet and banging his head and coming up with the flux capacitor. It is something that a business can establish just like a change management system or a project development or a product development system, and then can be leveraged by the right people at the right time to create an extraordinary outcome. Those are the definitions. So that's what we're talking about as we go through this. All right, I'm going to zoom in here so you can get your device up close with this QR code. This is just going to bump you to our website. We've got an online resource there called the Growth Blueprint Assessment. So it's a pretty simple assessment. I'm not going to ask you to complete it as part of what we're doing here together over the next several minutes. But I do want you to have it up and have it ready so that you have that as a takeaway, something that you can do after the session today. What this is going to guide you through is assessing leadership, strategy, and innovation in your organization right now. It's a current state assessment that is going to give you some insight into all three of those. So as it says here, building a successful organization requires focus and dedication at all three levels: executing a clear strategy, aligning the leadership team, and leveraging an innovation system to bring new ideas to reality systematically. So those are key things. Yesterday, just kind of reposted, Tech Manitoba's posted this event coming in and added a little line ahead of that. I don't know if we're connected on LinkedIn, myself and any of you. I can't quite see who's here. But if you saw that, I put that up there, learning to trust strategy and innovation to accomplish this outcome of growth. So whether you're a startup, and we're going to look at a business life cycle curve pretty soon here to give that some context, whether you're just starting up, whether you're in a growth phase, whether your organization is at maturity, it is important that the 3 bullet points on here are things that you trust to get the job done and aren't just exercises or things that you're maybe flippantly experimenting with. So doing that assessment is going to give you clarity on where you are today. It's also going to give you this scoring guide as well. So you don't have to memorize this. We don't have to walk through this. If we were in the same room, we'd take some time to do it now. But basically, if you're 0 to 10 in any area, there's work to be done. And that's not always a bad thing. At least you have clarity on where you think your organization is in that particular area. Then there's kind of middle of the road. There's probably things that can get better. And then if something shows up in that 19 to 25 range, then you know this is a strength or superpower that you might want to double down on or lean into to continue to accelerate growth. So that's just one thing for you to take away before we kind of dig into the material. We talked about the definition of strategy and innovation. We looked at the growth blueprint to see how they intersect and go through the stage of readiness, design, and execution to create that repeatable growth. This assessment gives you something to look at as far as assessing your current state. So basically, in this presentation, we're going to walk through as much as is possible, and I have a timer in front of me, of course, as much as possible through that growth blueprint, from readiness to design and systems to execution. So we're going to start up front with strategy and innovation readiness. So the outcomes, and you saw those a little bit on the blueprint diagram: an aligned organization prepared to lead with a strategic mindset and a foundation for transformative results. That's what you get when you really focus on readiness. And there are some great models and some great programs that can help get your team aligned when it comes to readiness. This pyramid right here is developed by Patrick Lencioni. You can see underneath there, it says the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team model. It comes from the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which Lencioni wrote or was put out in 2005. So it's been out there for quite a while and yet remains an extremely popular and successful model for assessing and improving team alignment. So it starts at the bottom with trust. If your team or your organization is weak in trust, you're not going to get to anything above it. If people are guarded in their conversations, if leaders aren't collaborating well, they aren't going to engage in healthy conflict. If they can't engage in healthy conflict, you never get to that point where you grind it out towards alignment. And because of that, decisions that are made in those meetings or conversations are not going to be committed to. If I don't get a chance or don't feel comfortable hashing it out with a coworker, I'm not going to commit to the decision that's made, and I'll just kind of go back and put my head down and do my thing. And if I'm not committed, I can't be held accountable or hold others accountable. If we're not holding each other accountable, then it's hard for us to focus on results. So I'm actually going to give us a very short moment of awkward silence, just so that you can take a few seconds to rate your team. Now, a really important concept that goes along with 5 dysfunctions in Lencioni's book is the concept of team one or first team. He kind of uses those titles interchangeably. And this was a game changer for me. Team one are your peers. So if you're a VP of sales, your team would be you as the VP of sales and the VP of ops and the VP of HR and so forth. It's a cross-functional group of peers at a common level within an organization. Where we tend to think of things as leaders is sort of down the hierarchical chart. I am the leader and my team, or team one, are the people who report to me. According to Lencioni, not so. We need to practice the alignment on a peer level before we're successful leading our organization or those teams who kind of roll up to us. I hope that makes sense. So I want you to take a few seconds to think about who is team one in your world. Is it a group of directors? Is it a group of deputy ministers? Is it a group of managers? What level are you at in the organization? Who are your peers? And then start thinking about this pyramid. I want you to, you got paper in front of you, you got something digital that you take notes on, great. Rate your team. 0 being, we do not have even the smallest semblance of this factor. It requires a whole lot of attention. And 5 being, if somebody wants to know what trust looks like on a team, they should come to us because we got this nailed down. And of course, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in between being somewhere along the way. What if I said you weren't allowed to put 3? Maybe that changes things for you, and you've got to end up on one side of things. So as I'm talking through the instructions, be writing it down somewhere in front of you where you're just assessing your team. You can sketch out this pyramid: trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, results. You can just put those words, and beside it, put your rating on that scale of 0 to 5. What we're going to do next is launch a poll. And in that, just want you to answer, the answers are basically these 5 words. Where do you need the most focus? And it's just interesting to see when a group attends what's common. And, since everything's anonymous, we're not, giving up any of our secrets here. But it is interesting to find out where others are. If we could launch the poll, we'll get you to consider the scoring that you did. And then answer the question of the poll. Where do you need the most focus right now on team alignment? And you can see that's up for you now. It's flipped from the diagram you have here, but the foundational one is number 1. All right, we have answers that have already rolled in here. And it's an interesting 25% across 4 of them, all above trust. So conflict, commitment, accountability, and results all have 25% of the answers of where you need to focus. So what do you do to work on those things? That's not a question that we're going to be able to answer in this session. However, that is precisely what a team alignment workshop is for identifying precisely where the team is on this according to their cumulative thoughts, and then facilitating through exercise in each of those categories, beginning at the foundation of trust. Now, remember, we're still talking about strategy and innovation readiness when it comes to building creating repeatable, predictable growth. There is strategy and innovation, readiness, design, and execution. Part of the readiness factor is having an aligned team. So afterwards, when you do the growth blueprint assessment from our website that you scan the QR code to get up on your device, you can kind of take a look at that against what you scored on this. And that'll give you a few takeaways right away. So how's the leadership alignment in the assessment results compared to what you scored here on the Lencioni pyramid? All right, great. And thank you for answering that. What we ended up with there was a 20% split with all 5 of those factors requiring focus for 20% of the room. So another readiness factor is having the right mindset. So not only does a leadership team need to be aligned, the leadership team needs to have the right mindset. So this comes from a book by Harvard Business Press called Thinking Strategically. What does it actually mean to think strategically? And how can I identify, coach, or nurture those characteristics within my leadership team? Let's say I'm the CEO and all the VPs are coming to it, or all of my directors, however flat or deep your organizational structure is. And I'm going to bring them into the strategic planning process. What should I be nurturing or looking for? So as you can see here, there's curiosity, flexibility, future focus, positive outlook, openness, and breadth. These are things that, you know, we could tend to just breeze over, but I really want to take some time to look at them and appreciate the importance of these characteristics. Why? Because, again, we tend to get caught in kind of firefighting mode in our day-to-day relationship with our accountabilities when we show up for work, myself included. When I show up here, there will be very tactical things that I'm focused on accomplishing every day. But are they necessarily getting me or getting our organization to where it needs to be in 3 to 5 years from now? So I need to have specific time where I'm intentionally practicing curiosity. So broadening my viewpoint, and it relates to breadth as well, genuine interest in industry and the wider business environment. And on the bottom there, continually broadening the knowledge and experience. So how can I move myself beyond my daily context? Part of that is curiosity, and then part of it is putting it into practice. Flexibility, I think we've all had to show a lot of flexibility as the world changes at a breakneck pace. We find ourselves needing to adapt when the information suggests that we need to change our course. And that's important for strategy execution as well, because strategy execution is not about determining a plan and then, you know, come any condition, we're going to execute on this plan as is. We have to look at information, adjust our plan, and be dynamic on the go. Future focus is such a key one, and that's important in innovation as well. We need to look at what the experts are theorizing may come in the future so that we're preparing for what may come. I mean, we've been hearing about recession for a long time on the outset of the pandemic and everything that created in our economic conditions in the country, in our province. We need to consider what life would look like if we enter full recession, and how do we recession-proof our organization. I won't go through each of those. You've probably been reading them while I've been speaking. We're in the readiness bucket. We talked about aligning the team, and then this slide is to talk about the characteristics that we're looking for. Now, here's a great way to assess your team, and you can get to work on this again, just in paper in front of you while I'm explaining what this is all about. But this is something that we'll do with the leader of an organization before we get into the strategic planning session with the entire group. And this is just to understand where the team is at from a readiness point of view. So on the one side, we've got strategic thinking, just like the last slide we looked at. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your team's ability to apply strategic thinking to their context, their daily situation, their role, and their accountabilities? 1 would be very little application of strategic thinking. They're mostly a tactical day-to-day approach type of group or individual. A 10 would be somebody who's very proficient in consistently applying strategic thinking. So they do their job, but then they're also thinking beyond, and maybe they tend to blow your mind with the information they're coming to your one-on-one meetings with. So that's one side, assess that strategic thinking. And then we want to look at ability to execute, strategy execution. So for an organization that's very well versed in strategic planning and strategy execution, they could just look at the last year, 2 or 3 years to say, with our last strategy, how well did we do? A 1 would be, we didn't really complete anything. We did a whole lot of work up front and got this report. And then we talked about it for a little while. We let it die. We came back. We tried to revive it. It didn't work. We went back to business as usual. That'd be a 1. A 10 would be, we are super disciplined about it. We've come all the way down to an action plan. We have people who lead these projects, and it has moved us forward closer to that desired state on the long-term horizon. That'd be a 10. Now, if you haven't done a strategic plan before, maybe you're a startup and you had a concept and you got a product out there, you kind of got your sales and marketing engines up and running enough to get the first sale, and the first sale led to the next one, and you start building some momentum, but you don't have this is where we want to be in 3 years clearly articulated. You can just rate your own ability to execute based on how your team executes on projects. Do they have what it takes to get something done, get it over the finish line? Or are you at 80% of the way, 20% dies type of organization? So that's everything that we're going to talk about in this session in the readiness bucket. Strategy and innovation, or strategy readiness in particular, is aligning the team, looking for the right characteristics, and using a tool like this to assess. Now, I want to just veer off a little bit and talk about innovation. I said I was going to bring up a business life cycle curve, so I am a man of my word. Here it is. Now, this is just for us to assess where we're at. I assume there's sort of a variety of representation on this call and within the attendance here today. Are you at startup? Are you at growth? I mentioned this already, at maturity, where there's highest profits and engagement, or are things on the decline? And unfortunately, if they're on a decline, they're headed towards death if you don't restart the curve. And that's what innovation is all about. So bigger organizations can find themselves on the backside of maturity or decline for a long period of time, often because the brand recognition, brand strength is strong enough to sort of flatten that out. Instead of it, sloping down so extremely, it just becomes a far more gradual occurrence. In that, you can see in the blue, cost cutting and building efficiencies becomes an obsession. And there are great systems in there, Lean, Six Sigma. Those are things that need to happen anyway, continuous improvement systems to make sure that the products you have, the services you offer, the programs that you develop are always relevant. But if you're doing it to build efficiencies and cut costs, that can only last for so long. Innovation is there to restart the curve. Now, at the top, you've got a dot on maturity. The reason we have it there is because that is the best place to restart the curve. You have highest profits, highest engagement, the most ample resources, the most brand recognition. You can leverage those to make the curve restart. Whereas if you're trying to do it on the back half, it's not impossible. It's just more difficult to do. That's a quick review of why innovate. Now, when it comes to innovation, there are 2 levels. Just want you to be aware there's a core innovation, keeps us competitive, and there are leap innovations that create the future. Often an organization may be tentative about innovation because they think everything is high risk. Even worse, high risk, no reward. So this diagram is here to show us in the innovation readiness thing, we need to understand what it is, why we do it, and then that there's different levels. Let me give you a quick example. Let's talk about how we have consumed music through, let's say, the last 100 years or so. It started off where the only thing that we could do is go to some sort of live performance, probably a symphony, and that only worked if I lived in a major center like New York City. But if I was a farmer in Ohio, there was no way that I was ever going to hear music outside of maybe myself singing, or if I had a fiddle hanging on the wall. Along came a leap innovation, a lithograph. We know it as a record. And all of a sudden, they would gather people at the local community hall or church or whatever and play a symphony. And wow, all of a sudden, I don't have to go to a major center. Core innovation brought that into the home. Now I can have lithographs or records in my home, and I can have a gramophone, kind of cone-shaped speaker that went along with that. And continuous core innovations changed our relation to it. 8 tracks gave us the ability to take it into the vehicle. Cassettes made them smaller, more compact. We could store our collection more easily. CDs improved the sample rate and the audio quality, and then we could put them all in our case logic cases and take the risk of our car getting broken into, but we had better audio quality. And then along came the next leap innovation. And if you're of my generation, you'll remember Napster coming out in the mid-90s. A couple things didn't work there. A, telecom infrastructures were insufficient for that to be a good experience. B, it was illegal at the time. However, it changed the future. And core innovations that came off of that are basically how we mostly consume music today, unless we're a collector. We probably use digital platforms like Apple Music or Spotify and so forth. That's just an example of the difference between core and leap innovations. Both are innovations. So it's not all high risk. When it comes to developing a balanced innovation portfolio in your organization, 85% of your effort should be focused on the core, moving from the 8-track to the cassette to the CD. 15% should be focused on that let's change the world type of stuff, going from an ATM to online banking, for example. Those are so breakthrough that they tend to create 50% of the growth, the LEAP initiatives. However, they're a smaller portion of your portfolio. So the last part on innovation readiness. So part of innovation readiness there was, of course, understanding why it's important to innovate, understanding that there are 2 levels, how they fit in a portfolio. Part of this is recognizing that innovation needs to start with strategy. So when it comes to creating repeatable, predictable growth, you have to leverage these both as core business systems integrated. You guys, we have a strategic plan over here and we have innovation over here. And this group of people are the creative people with the light bulb moments who do the wild and crazy, and maybe we listen to them and maybe we don't. That's not the way this is going to work. And the strategy people tell us where we're going and there's a plan somewhere, but I can't access it. We need to break that wide open and leverage these as core business systems that people have a line of sight into. I know what our strategy is. And then innovation is actually a vehicle for getting your strategy complete and executed. You need to determine who's going to lead innovation in your organization and who's going to be trained in it. Beware of isolated innovation departments. I'll just get that out there from our experience with clients. There's more success when it's a cross-functional approach to being skilled up. And if somebody's going to lead it, maybe they're just accountable for the innovation pipeline, but as sort of an all-inclusive process within your organization. And then reflect. As a leader, are you ready for it? Do you understand it? Are you ready to build that portfolio and do things differently? Why does it fail then? Innovation fails because we don't tie it to the strategy very often. There's some subpoints to that. There's a lack of innovation culture. So we don't have cross-functional collaboration in any way. We don't have a repeatable system. We're hoping that somebody's going to have a crazy light bulb moment that's going to set us into the future, but we have no system that we're following, or a lack of sponsorship or too much bureaucracy. So I rattled through very quickly the readiness. If we're going through that first bucket, our organization needs to be ready. On the strategy side, we need to have the right mindset. We need to have an aligned leadership team. We need to have those capabilities to think strategically. And on the innovation side, we need to understand where it fits, why it's important, what a balanced portfolio looks like, and again, set things up for a cross-functional culture that's going to leverage it to get the job done. So through the intentional use of both strategy and innovation, we can achieve that repeatable, predictable growth. Let's talk a little bit very quickly about design, strategy design. So we have a 5-step process. I'll zoom right in on here to develop a strategy. So some of you may have developed strategic plans in the past, and we've had some clients who've come to us and they have done it maybe 5 years prior, and it was painful. It may have been an overly academic process that included months of research and included hours upon hours upon hours of meetings over months of time, massive workshops for days on end, and people get burned out and they have what I call strategy scars. They don't want to go there again. There needs to be an approach to building strategy that designs it for execution. There's some great authors in the strategy execution realm. Robert Simons is a Harvard professor, has an absolutely great perspective on strategy execution. There's a really great course on that through Harvard. And it's all about designing it to be executed upon. It's not about tons and tons of research and then sort of foggy on where the action comes in. So our process is built for execution. So even though this is in the design phase of that growth blueprint, sort of category 2, we did readiness, now we're in design. The design has to lead to the execution. It needs to be something that's abundantly executable. And you'll see by this how we also put into practice some of those strategic thinking characteristics we talked about earlier. So number 1 is determining the purpose. There's many ways that this can be done: mission statements, vision statements, values. There's all kinds of guiding principles. What we tend to do is Simon Sinek's golden circle exercise to determine a why statement. Again, it's concise. It's closer to action. But however you do it, step 1 is about determining the organization's purpose. Step 2 is assessing where you're at today. So there needs to be a current state analysis. As it says here, use tools like a SWOT analysis. We have that in there because likely people are familiar with that. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You're looking inside the organization and outside at your industry, or maybe not your industry, maybe something unrelated, just to give you a broader stimulus. And again, that's where you see those strategic thinking characteristics coming in. A SWOT forces us to think outside. So that's number 2, a very realistic look at where you are today. We call it confronting reality. And number 3, creating clear goals and actions. So we suggest using the law of threes format. That's our format. I'll show you a diagram in a minute. It's not above as it says there. So that everybody can see what are the big goals over, say, a 3-year horizon, what are the step goals over a 1-year horizon, and how does that relate into actions. Number 4 is remove things that get in the way. So this is where we are being intentional in the strategy design to make sure it's executable. So we want to look at, well, what would get in our way of executing on this strategy? New and shiny initiatives, maybe funding opportunities that we didn't see coming. That do we want to chase it down or do we not want to chase it down? So we want to identify all of those things that could get in the way of executing strategy right there within the session. And then what would we do about it? And then number 5, we talk about a framework of accountability, and in that is a rhythm. So reviewing progress often, making sure that we're getting together, we're looking at the strategy. We use a framework called Decision Point within our organization, where we're actually looking at our strategy every week for 45 minutes. We're looking at outside context, we're looking at how we're performing, and we're holding that up against the strategy and saying, is this thing still relevant? If not, what do we need to change? Or should we just keep pushing through? That's a quick look at strategy design using a 5-step method to do it. As we said, we suggest using law of threes to capture the strategic plan. So we've got a big goal, typically no further out than 3 years on a big goal. Step goals are around 1 year. So if we complete all 3 of these step goals, then we should be moving our big goal forward X percentage on that big horizon we determined. The actions are more like quarterly sprints or projects, and there's a maximum of 3 of those to each step goal. So I think you're getting how this works. We don't exceed 3 in any one of those 3 levels on strategy design. So you have to have a design you're following. You also have to have an innovation system that you're following. So I won't walk you through all this because we're starting to get into a lot of information and some more complexity. But when it comes to creating repeatable, predictable growth, you have to have that strategy design. Again, law of threes is what we suggest using. But how you're going to get that strategy done, maybe the action items, you want to do something more innovative, or you know there's a different approach that needs to be taken, you're not sure what it is yet. That's where you would funnel that activity into this innovation system. It starts with a strategic plan. We use a tool called the blue card to now define or frame it in a way that becomes the initiation for a project. And then that project group is going to get together. We're looking for diversity of thought there. So not just, all, one thinking style of person, or one department of people or one background of people. We want to mix that all up so that we can do the stimulus mining, the research, we can create unique ideas, do the rapid cycles of learning, and come up with a strong case for the action item in the strategy. So the reason I'm showing that, and I'll just zoom out so we got kind of both of those in our view here. Those are the 2 items that are relating to this middle one, even though the red circle's around the wrong spot at the moment. Strategy design and innovation system. We leverage the readiness and we get into design, which is going to result in a strategic plan that could look like something like that, and leveraging an innovation system, much like this, the innovation engineering system, to get those action items determined and executed on. We only have a few minutes left here in the presentation. So I'm just going to show you a couple more things as I can fit. Again, you're not going to be a master in any of these things on the growth blueprint, but I want to give you a quick overview into how strategy and innovation create that repeatable, predictable growth. When it comes to translating your strategy into a blue card so that you can, this is that intersection of strategy and innovation I talked about. You may have a big goal on your strategic plan. There's just one here called digital excellence. And it may have a step goal like increase percentage of users using our mobile banking app from 25 to 26%. That's a good, a well-written goal because it tells us we're trying to increase. It tells us what the benchmark is. It tells us what our goal is. In that case, we know exactly what the actions need to be. So the team might just, boom, these are the 3 actions, now go do. In the case of step goal 2, we may be lacking clarity there. So it's increase the percentage of online versus in-branch or over the phone applications for new accounts from 52%, 75%. This might be an area where we've tried this before. We haven't been able to get the outcome that we want to achieve. So here it is on our strategy again. We need a unique solution to this very meaningful problem. So you would take step goal 2 and you would build it out into what we call a blue card, which tells us the narrative, why it's super important to do this right now. What are the exclusions? We don't want ideas like this. Constraints, we have to get it done within this amount of time for this budget with this amount of people. And we hand that over to an innovation project team who does the work through the innovation system to determine the actions and get the actions done. So there is a translation from the strategic plan into the innovation system via the blue card. That's framework of accountability. So I'm just going to go back to the blueprint just to kind of sum up before we get into some Q&A time. To show us what I very quickly walked us through, and hopefully it gets a little messy here with these additional images on top, but that maybe reminds you of what you saw in the presentation and how it relates. So really what we're looking for is repeatable, predictable growth. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to trust strategy and innovation as core business systems that intersect, that we can leverage in the right way at the right time to produce the outcomes we're looking for. The first bucket is readiness, strategy and innovation readiness. Talked about Lencioni's model. We looked at that strategy capacity assessment, our thinking and our ability to execute. The growth blueprint assessment, you have the QR, hopefully you have that up on your device. And secondly, and lastly, for this presentation, we went into the design section of the blueprint. We looked at using law of threes and that 5-step methodology to create a strategic plan, and how the innovation system then folds over or intersects to build out our action items when we know we need to do things in a unique way. All right, so that's a lot of information, and I see there's some Q&A, so I don't know if I need to stop sharing my screen or if we might want to reference some things. Maybe I'll leave it up, Shaylin, just in case it helps answer a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very thorough, and a very great preview into how strategy and innovation.
Probably asking me something and my speaker automatically shut off. I apologize.
Okay. Now, yeah. Okay. So we have lots of great questions. The first one is, we've gone through strategic planning before and seen little in the way of results. How can an organization ensure they get the intended result from the plan?
An excellent question, and I would say it's a very common question. I mentioned that strategy scars before. It often comes down to the previous buckets. Again, I'm glad I'll just leave the blueprint up here. If the design was overly complex and didn't have execution in mind, you might be looking at a report that you don't know what to do with, right? There aren't action items on it, so it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't translate into things that I can do. And even before that, maybe there was no readiness. Maybe we don't have a common view of the importance of why we're doing a strategic plan right now. So how can you get the most out of it? You need to focus on the readiness, the alignment of the team, and the capacity of the team. You need to use a framework to design it that is actionable. And then on the execution side, you need to have a dedicated rhythm. You need to know who's got a role in the strategy, like who's accountable for what, and then how often are we going to meet and do those updates.
Awesome. The next most popular question is, where do most people get stuck during a strategic plan?
I like it. People most often get stuck in the middle. I'm going to go back to the 5-step methodology here just because I'm visual, and everybody always says they're visual too. So there we go. Number 3 there, create clear goals and action. So often when we're facilitating it, it's, talking about purpose. It's big. Sometimes it's very fun, and it's like, all right, we've got meaning in it, so our hearts are in it. We come up with a great why statement. Then we assess where we're at. Often people are pretty good at that. It's like, okay, our results are this. We're really good at this. We're stinking over here. And then it's like, okay, so what? Now you need to be decisive and say, over the next 3 years, these are the 3 things we want to accomplish. You can't do it all. So sometimes there's this hesitation or this pause or even getting frozen to say, well, how do I know? How do I know what's right? You have to be decisive and go forward with what you know today. You do it. I remember doing a strategic planning session where somebody who had been in that particular sector for 33 years is like, well, how do I know? Like, how am I supposed to know? I think we need to do more research. And I said, I just took the role of strategy coach at the moment and be a little bit more frank. You've been doing this for 33 years. Other people doing their strategic plan should be coming to you and saying, what do you think we need to focus on? So that's a little bit about how to break free from it as well. Most people get stuck in the middle, and sometimes you need to trust your experience and do the best with the information you have available at that time.
Yeah, so it sounds like lots of people get stuck in the concept phase, but then are scared to actually take the action steps.
Right.
Yeah. We know innovation is important, but we don't know how to get started. We can't afford the risk. What do you recommend for an organization in this position? So almost
Yeah,
what
that's
we talked about.
yeah, that's a big question. So I'll just give, you know, in the interest of time, sort of a simpler answer. Don't just start training in it, which is, you know, we train people in it. So of course we're interested in training people in it, but we do often see organizations will send people for innovation training, but they don't have any plan for that person and their skills when they come back. And they're learning a very specific system. It's the one I showed you the diagram of in the presentation. So they're learning the skills that fit this system right here. If you're looking to get into innovation, you got to leverage the system. Now, you will actually want to control the impact of the system while you're learning it. So determine who you're going to train in it, what system you're going to train in, and what role is that system going to play in your organization? What outcomes are you looking to get from it? Don't just dabble, or you'll end up frustrating your people, because they'll get trained, they'll be excited, they'll come back, and there's no place for them to leverage those skills.
Gotcha. The next question is, what are some examples of teams you've worked with who've had success with strategy and innovation?
That's great. And we do have permission from our clients to use their names. So we're totally okay to do that. So we've got, I usually go to WinPack as a first example. So they're in manufacturing, and they do packaging. So when you go to Costco, Walmart, and there's any film over top of a product that you're buying, WinPack produces it. Anytime you use a Keurig coffee, WinPack has produced both the lid and the container for that. When you buy a thing of Pringles, so they're a very massive company. We've been working with them for 7 or 8 years. They started with innovation projects. So they said, hey, like the diagram that's in front of you, we want to run an innovation project. Can you help us? So we went in and ran a project. They picked a product line that was suffering, that wasn't producing the results that they needed. And based on their work, they were able to leverage this system and turn it around into one of their most profitable product lines within a year to 18 months. So pretty amazing results. And then they went forward and said, okay, we want to train more people. We have several levels of training. So we went into a training, and then we went into strategic planning as well. So, okay, we want to develop a strategy for innovation. We want to develop a strategy for sustainability. So it kind of, it built out from there. So now they're leveraging both our strategy and innovation systems together. But it's really quite amazing to see a company leverage that. And we have other examples. I'm going to give one more quick one, because do I have 7 minutes? Is that correct? To answer questions?
Oh yeah, you have time still. Go ahead.
Okay, so here's another one, because this is something that I think is important to point out. And I don't know that we have permission on the name of this one, so forgive the vagaries here. But a large manufacturing company as well, and they're in medical devices, so that's what they're producing. They engaged us for an innovation wave to innovate an existing platform. So they didn't want to come up with a whole new type of device. So let's say they had a catalog of 5 devices. They didn't want a 6th one. They wanted a core innovation. Remember, we talked about the different levels. So we want to take this device platform and innovate it so that it can serve a new maybe customer segment. So they came up with a really cool concept. They had a lot of experience in research and development, so it was a lot of fun to work with them on that innovation wave, because they just took to the process so well and so quickly. But that product never saw the light of day, and it is a success. As you can see at the bottom, there's rapid cycles here to check critical risks. So they leveraged the system, and before they ever put anything to market, they had approved business case. Yes, that looks like a good idea, because they've done these cycles. Then they went into the development stage, and you're going one milestone at a time. And we need to verify the customer segment. They found at that point the customer segment was too narrow. The more they refined the idea to address the risks, the more the narrower the customer segment got, and they killed the idea. And they did that without wasting any money. I've had a lot of experiences in organizations that I've worked for where we've identified a problem, we got a solution, and then we implement the solution. And guess what? It doesn't work. And sometimes to catastrophic results, millions of dollars spent, and then whatever fallout happens from, initiating this new system, whether that's a human system or technology system. So that client leveraged this to kill an idea before they implemented something and burned a whole bunch of cash and resources.
So successful failure then.
Exactly. And that's so important in innovation. Not everything is going to come out as the shiny new thing that everybody's going to be super impressed with. It could be a very reliable system for proving something out in a systematic way and moving on.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it as well, because I'm sure most people just talk about the success stories, but not necessarily the failures.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, one more last question. Do you find that younger staff are more innovative?
You're going to ask the guy with all the white hair that question? Absolutely not. In fact, people who are in their mid-40s are the most creative. I'm just kidding. That's a very self-serving answer. But it poses a broader question, which I think is really cool and really important for innovation too. We need all thinking types. We often use a visual. Darn it, it's not in this particular presentation, but there's like a continuum to our preference for change. Some people would be considered a conservative or a conserver when it comes to change. Like, oh no, not more change. I can't handle it. So I'll just look at all the risks and I'll poke holes in it like crazy. And then on the other end of that continuum would be the originator. I love blowing things up all the time. Change it, flip it on its head. Let's see what happens, right? They have no risk aversion whatsoever. And then in the middle, we call the pragmatist. So they can kind of lean in either direction and are often a very good translator. Now, usually people are somewhere along this continuum. If you picture a straight line with conserver on one end and originator on the other, they're somewhere along there. It's not just like two linear buckets that we fall into. But in innovation, we need all of it. Often people will suggest, and I know I'm not answering the age question, so I'll say no to the age question to be clear, because we need all types of experience and age and background and so forth. But it really comes down to personal style or change preference. We need a room that's balanced with conservers who are great at poking holes in things, because we need to be abundantly realistic about things in innovation. And we need the originators so that we can come up with the wild and crazy. If you just throw out safe ideas all the time, you'll never actually get an innovation. So you need the originator to throw the wild and crazy idea out there, and the conserver to say the risks are this. And then the group works together to make the wild and crazy idea feasible. But at least at the end of the day, you have an innovation. So that answers more than was asked, but I hope it's helpful.
Absolutely. A diverse team sounds like is the best answer for innovation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan, and your presentation. I hope everybody here is inspired to think a little bit more innovatively and strategic, and that you found this presentation insightful. Real quick, I want to announce a couple upcoming events that we're hosting. So our next Tech Mashup is going to be on May 9th. That one's Unlock the Hidden Power of Microsoft 365. It'll be virtual on Remo once again. Michael Heppels from Bloom Software will be joining us to give an overview of how to use Microsoft 365 as a project management tool. He'll explain the pros and cons of Microsoft Project, Planner, and Tasks. And then another exciting event we have is with Manitoba Women in Tech, Taking the Leap into Tech. So it's a story of career reinvention. That one is going to be an evening event Wednesday, April 19th from 5:45 to 8:15 p.m. Also virtual on this remote platform. Kyla from Grid is going to be joining us to discuss her career journey. She went from working as a lawyer and pivoted into tech. So she's going to share her lessons learned along the way. Thanks again for joining us. That concludes the formal part of our program. You're now going to be transported back to your tables. The event doors are going to stay open until about 1:15, so feel free to network amongst yourselves. Thanks.